I made fun of a couple comedy sketches where people pretended to be playing Dungeons and Dragons as either liberals or conservatives. Something I probably should have made clearer in that video is that most political comedy sucks, not just centrist comedy, mine included. But I'm not going to make equivocations here. Conservative comedy sucks the most. Nothing is less suited to making people laugh than a staunch dedication to preserving the status quo and protecting the privilege of those currently sitting atop the social order. The conservative ethos goes against what makes comedy work, namely empathy. You have to be able to relate to other people to make them laugh. You have to be able to understand how things make people feel so that you can make them feel laughy. And I don't mean you have to be able to read people's emotions or social cues well, because God knows most comedians I've ever met have been complete social clowns. But you have to be able to look at things from someone else's point of view. And I don't want to put too fine a point on it, but the right doesn't know how to do that. If you could empathize with people, you wouldn't be able to champion defunding social programs that vulnerable people require to keep themselves and their family fed. You wouldn't be able to complain about having to wear a mask at the Piggly Wiggly if you could comprehend the dangers to other people if you didn't and actually cared about them. You wouldn't be able to watch the police brutalize innocent protesters without thinking to yourself, gee, I wouldn't like it if the police shot me in the eye with a tear gas canister. The conservative ethos is diametrically opposed to comedy. It's opposed to creating joy and laughter for other people because screw other people. They can make themselves laugh. Take some personal responsibility for your own laughter for a change, you lazy entitled millennials. The subject of today's video is a conservative comedian named Ryan Long and his viral hit video When Wokes and Racists Actually Agree on Everything, which to date has almost 2 million views, a fact that has my finger hovering over the delete channel button in the YouTube dashboard. When I talked about sketches from Man Shorts, I was pretty easy on them. Those guys don't seem like total jerks, and it would have felt pretty bad to rip into them. Ryan, though, Ryan is vile. Just a hateful man with an ugly, spiteful sense of humor. He deserves worse than any insult I'm going to dish out today, but I'll do my best. Now let me just address something real quick. Whenever you criticize a piece of comedy, people tend to get upset and tell you, hey buddy, you know, what you're doing is just a joke. It's just a joke, you're taking it too serious. And indeed, everything I am about to criticize in this video is just a bunch of jokes, some yuck-em-ups that I'm gonna take too serious. But the thing is, saying a shitty thing in a way that's funny, or in this case, trying desperately to be funny, is still shitty. I don't know why people have this idea in their heads that because something is a joke, it is immune to criticism, as though nobody could express their sincere beliefs in the form of a joke. So, if you're going to complain about that, then my video is also a joke. This is all jokes. If you don't like it, you don't get the joke. Checkmate. So who exactly is this guy? Ryan Long is a comedian. He runs a podcast called The Boys Cast. So ladies, hang back. This podcast is not for you, it's for the boys. Finally, a podcast for men. Let's have a listen, shall we?
You get to wear whatever you want to work. Guys have one option. You get to wear a suit. They try to spruce it up. All they get to do is, I'll wear a tighter suit than you. Maybe mine will be a little blue. You get to put a cool tie on. And girls get to wear essentially their normal clothes. I've worked at girls have sandals on. They're showing their toes. They have shorts on. A wife beater. They're literally wearing a tank top. You get to wear whatever you want to work. Guys have one option. You get to wear a suit. They try to spruce it up. All they get to do is, I'll wear a tighter suit than you.
Wow. Okay. That is so much ignorant shit said in rapid succession. It's hard to keep up with. I picked that video at random because it was just the first clip from his podcast I saw on his YouTube channel that was under an hour long, and I thought, yeah, this will just be a good piece of flavor that shows who this guy is. Ryan, my dude, have you ever met a woman, like, in your life? Have you ever lived with a woman, or like had a female coworker, or had a woman sleep over at your apartment? Like, my partner gets up in the morning and spends an hour putting on makeup to go to a Zoom meeting. The idea that women are judged less harshly than men for their clothes in the workplace is so completely out of touch. The reason it takes women longer to get ready in the morning is because if they don't look absolutely at their best at all times, dickheads like you will complain about it. Ryan, the average price for a men's haircut in the United States is $28. The average price for a woman's haircut is $43, according to a survey conducted by the Professional Beauty Association. A woman's haircut is more than 50% more expensive because women have to have their hair on point every day or people judge them. Women also spend more on clothing, and they also have to buy a lot more clothing because, unlike men, they're expected to wear a completely different outfit each day, while men can essentially wear the same type of suit all week and no one even notices. Ryan, you're a comedian. Your job doesn't require you to wear any kind of expensive clothes. You wear a t-shirt to work. You're wearing a t-shirt right now at your job. What the fuck are you talking about, Ryan? But even if women had an easier time dressing in the office, that wouldn't change the point. It is discriminatory that women can't show their nipples in public while men can, regardless of whatever other privileges you believe women possess, having never actually spoken to one. It doesn't matter if their shoes are more comfortable. It's still a problem that they can't breastfeed in public. Babies can't eat shoe comfort, Ryan. Babies eat milk from nipples that women are unable to expose in public. That's why people have nipples. That's what they're for. I cannot stress this enough. I just picked a clip at random. This is what he's like all the time. Even later in this clip, to mock women who complain that diseases that are perceived to be women's diseases are treated as though they don't exist, he goes on to claim that fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue don't exist.
For diseases that affect your gender more, you don't have to face skepticism on whether or not it's a real disease. Like women with conditions like fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue. The amount of fake diseases women have invented. I'm going to tell you guys right now on the Patreon that fibromyalgia is a lie. It's literally...
And his evidence for this extraordinary claim is... Doesn't it seem like they don't? Like, don't you think maybe they don't? To put it another way, the evidence is nothing. Not evidence. Evidencent. Sorry, the Mayo Clinic. Sorry, the World Health Organization. Sorry, Harvard Medical School. Sorry, MRI scans, which consistently show abnormalities in the brain of fibromyalgia sufferers. There's a new doctor in town, and he's some dipshit who hosts the only podcasts for boys. I think he'd know whether or not a disease is real without looking into it or Googling it even. He's just doing the thing that women are complaining about and simultaneously also claiming it doesn't happen. This is a concerning lack of self-awareness. Jesus Christ. I'm 1,100 words in and I haven't even gotten to the video yet. I can't help it. Everything this guy says is just the worst shit. I'm not going to get distracted. I'm just going to go into his YouTube page, find the video, click on...
I don't know if you guys know this, but there is actually 72 genders.
Well, this is autoplay.
71 genders. Boys, boys, boys. You're right.
This is not my fault. How do I...
She said she's gender fluid, which means half the time she's a girl and half the time he's a guy, which means my buddy's gay half the time, which sucks because she pays the rent and he's like, oh, do I get a job or do I have a boyfriend? Like, it's a complicated dilemma he's in. I don't know how it works. Like, can they switch mid-sex? Like, he's having sex with her and it's like a full moon or wherever it happens, and he's giving it to her and she's just like, give me a beer.
Okay, let's talk about this garbage too, I guess. Now, I could write a whole 1,000 words on why he's wrong about gender. In fact, I did, and then I deleted it because I realized it's kind of pointless to show how wrong he is. Because as long as he can make a pithy joke out of pretending to not understand, no amount of correction is going to get through. But I think this clip does a great job of showing why this dickhead is worth criticizing in the first place. Because sure, everything he's saying in this clip is a joke, but look at how he tells the joke. See how he kind of leans back and shrugs as he says there are 72 genders?
I don't know if you guys know this, but there is actually 72 genders now.
Hear the voice he uses when he talks about it? That tells the audience something. He's showing them that he thinks what he's saying is ridiculous. And it kind of is, because he's misinterpreting what that means. There's not 72 genders. There were 72 gendered options on Facebook at one point, and that's gender's a spectrum. There's infinite points along a spectrum that you can fall on, but that's not the point. The point is he's making a joke. And the part of that setup to the joke is that he thinks the idea of there being more than two genders is ridiculous. It's a thing that he said that's surrounded by jokes. It itself is not a joke. Now, you might think I'm reading too much into this one little moment, but what you have to understand is that stand-up comics rehearse their material to death. Every little motion, every aspect of the performance is deliberate. It might seem casual to you, like he's just coming up with it off the top of his head. He's just thinking of this as he's speaking, and it's all stream of consciousness, and that's why everything he's saying is bad and wrong. But that's why they call comedians set their act. It's all a performance, and the way the material is delivered is just as, if not more important than the material itself. He could have just said it like, well, I don't know if you guys know this, but there are actually 72 genders now. But the way he said it is like this.
I don't know if you guys know this, but there is actually 72 genders now.
Jokes convey information, and if that information is wrong or bigoted or cruel, then we should call it out. We should criticize it. Because we don't give a pass to any other medium like we do with comedy. Nobody watches Birth of a Nation and says, you know, sure, the KKK are the good guys in this movie, but it's just a story. Nobody listens to Imagine Dragons and says, yeah, sure, everything about this sucks, but it's just music. But when a joke is mean-spirited, like the joke I just made about Imagine Dragons, we're supposed to let that fly. And for the record, I have no interest in censoring Ryan or any other shitty comedian. I think that they should be free to say whatever terrible shit they want, as much as they want. What I think should happen after that is everybody else should say, wow, fuck you. And ideally, make fun of them for how shitty the joke is and how it looks like he's dying when he delivers it. He looks like the joke is sapping his life force and like he's a wilting flower nobody watered. I mention this because Ryan is very concerned with censorship. Those dastardly wokes are coming to get him canceled. I'm canceling him right now with my wokeness and all the power I get from that.
It's 2020. The time for laughter is over.
See, a lot of people think that being a comedian is about getting laughs, writing jokes, or creating content.
But being a real comedian is about preventing others from getting laughs.
Writing naughty lists.
And having content removed from platforms of all kinds.
By making fun of his jokes or pointing out their shittiness, I'm actually poisoning the discourse.
Being a comedian is about challenging the idea that comedians should be challenging ideas.
It's about...
You can't criticize comedians. Comedians are supposed to challenge ideas. Comedians are supposed to be able to make fun of anything. Which is why nobody can make fun of them and no one can challenge the ideas they present, because those are jokes. Who are these people going around canceling comedians, Ryan? Because one of the most popular comedians in the world got outed as a serial sexual abuser several times before it stuck, and he still got work after that. And based on that description, I could be talking about a number of people, Ryan. That should tell you something. Which comedian actually got canceled? Off the top of my head, like Bill Cosby did, which I think is pretty fair, actually, dude. But even he was still booking shows until he went to prison. The only comedians I know who have been blacklisted from the industry are women who came forward with complaints of sexual abuse or harassment at the hands of male comedians. Literally every woman comedian I've ever met, and I've met a lot, no matter how established in the industry, has told me a story of a time when they've been afraid to come forward with something a male comic has done to them out of fear that it would hurt their career. Not the man's career, their career. To hurt them, because someone else did something bad to them. When P-brains like Ryan complain about getting canceled, let's call it what it is, they're getting criticized. People are saying what they're doing sucks, not trying to destroy them or ruin their careers for no reason. Criticism is not censorship. People not buying tickets to your shows is not censorship. Boycotting a venue because you don't like the comics they hire is not censorship. It has become cliche to mention this, but the video where he's complaining about getting silenced, where he actually does the thing with the tape over his mouth that all the intellectual dark web and internet Nazis did in like 2016, has 157,000 views at the time of this writing. He has 129,000 YouTube subscribers. He has a thriving comedy career. Who exactly is silencing you, Ryan? You have hundreds of millions of views on your content. I get criticized in the comments of my videos every day. I get roasted on Twitter every fucking day. Live with it, dude. Part of making content is learning to deal with that. Toughen up, Buttercup. You have a right to say whatever you want, and everyone else has the right to tell you, dead ass to your face, that what you're saying sucks and you ought to stop. The only measure of whether a stand-up is funny or not is whether the audience laughs. Nothing else matters. That's your job. The thing is, if they're not laughing, or if they don't enjoy it, it doesn't matter why. It doesn't matter if they're not laughing because it's not funny or because they're too sensitive. It doesn't matter if they're not laughing because they don't understand the joke or because they think your joke is in poor taste. It doesn't matter if they're not laughing because they just don't like you. Your job is to entertain people, not to pursue some philosophical ideal of truth through deconstruction.
Thank you, chat.
If people don't enjoy your act...
Thank you for sticking around. Would you mind turning on the subtitle? I'm so sorry. Yes, of course. Let me do that real quick. I am back with the snacks. Don't leave again. I am so sorry. This YouTube guy has free will to say whatever he wants, obviously, but he probably won't be fulfilled in his life if he doesn't change his current everyday thoughts to positive thoughts. Oh no, Chrissy the Empath. So I think what is so interesting about leftist YouTubers is that they do take on the dystopian element of our policies that make it so incredibly difficult for some people to survive. And I don't know so much about this video in particular, but unfortunately, it is absolutely necessary to have a realist perspective on the current conditions of our policies that lead to such dire circumstances for those who... Okay, I understand now why Amy said... but, you know, at the same time, if we don't have some people who are willing to talk about the various elements in our modern political sphere that has led to the injustices that are around us and the ways in which draconian policies and austerity measures has led to various degrees of almost unlivable material and other conditions, that it almost makes it necessary to go beyond the scope of positivity to a pragmatic perspective to fully describe or encapsulate our current social, political, and economic issues from, again, an honest perspective, if that makes sense. If I describe that correctly. I too think that it's important to try to be as positive as possible, but it can be really difficult. You know what? I think that one of the reasons why it's incredibly difficult to even feel as though you can make a difference by running for public office is because a lot of people have done things in their past that that'll be an impediment to allow them to make a difference. And sometimes, you know, some people just want to be able to create content and spread awareness and build capacity. I guess it would be an important reminder for those who feel as though they are in a position to run for office because they can make a difference. But unfortunately, I think that we can't necessarily force people to want to run for public office, especially if there's something that's, or there's a lot of public scrutiny and pressure that goes into that, and running for office is definitely not for everyone. But I like what leftist breadtubers do, where they do raise awareness, they share their perspectives that can be incredibly helpful and almost necessary in order to garner support and raise awareness, because we don't have a lot of people talking about leftist ideologies or thoughts or philosophy, and I do appreciate the work that Thought Slime does. Isn't he Canadian? Yes. Would you consider running with AOC in 2040? Would I consider? I don't know where I'll be in 2040. All I know is that I got one of the most delicious snackies, chat. I don't know if you are familiar with it. Let's see what kind of brand this is. Don David. But it's basically like spicy mango. Show it close up. Can you see it? It's mango. It's let's see. Chili mango is pretty much what we call it, I guess. It's so good though. More relevant question, will AOC still be cool in 2040? I think so. Mukbang stream, change the title. Run for the fucking dog catcher? Oh. Oh. Speaking of dogs, chat. On my way to the store, I saw 3 dogs just hanging out, walking down the street by themselves. They were definitely like a group. They were crossing like a major intersection. I'm like, what are these dogs doing? But they were looking out for one another. One of the dogs looked back and was like, hey, catch up. And the dog they kind of waited for the other dog, who was a little slow. And then once the other dog caught up, they were just running down the street together. It was the strangest thing I've ever seen. It was strange, like just 3 dogs out for a night, taking a stroll. I wanted to take a picture, but I couldn't. Life will be better. I agree. Maybe. Hopefully. I mean, I don't know. It really was like a pack of dogs just like hanging out. It was like the little one that was like taking its time, had little legs. It was a little white dog. And then one looked like a shepherd. They were all different breeds too. One might have been a pit bull. It's hilarious. I don't know. I really wish I could have captured that because it was funny, but I didn't. Like an idiot. Anyway.
Nobody should care why, and you should stop whining about it. You can go to any open mic show, and you'll see losers who can't get a laugh and who bitterly blame the audience for their failure. People who think that being shocking is the same thing as being clever, as though screaming rape or abortion into a microphone is a genuine substitute for joke writing. Those types of people are supposed to get better or wash out. Nowadays, though, you have all these comics who think it's everyone else's fault that they're not respected as the auteur they are. I've studied the greats! I've studied Carlin and Pryor and Hitz, and I'm doing the same thing they did 30 years ago. I deserve laughter. I am owed for the work I've put in. I don't have to change. The audience has to change to suit me, the entertainer. The audience just can't take a joke. People are mad at me because everybody's too sensitive and cancel culture. And they probably just want to be mad at something. Everybody gets off on being offended. That's the problem. Maybe. But they chose to be mad and get offended at you. And that didn't happen by accident. If the audience is too sensitive, so what? Tell jokes that appeal to sensitive people. If you can't make sensitive people laugh, maybe you're not cut out for this line of work. Jesus Christ, we're 2,300 words into this video, and I still haven't gotten to the video I want to talk about.
I definitely washed my hands, by the way. I definitely washed my hands, just to be clear.
Okay, let's discuss when wokes and racists actually agree on everything. Because you see, the real racists are the wokes, like the people who don't like racism. They're the real racists. I need a drink.
When me and Brad first met, I didn't think we'd get along, but turns out we kind of agree on everything. Your racial identity is the most important thing. Everything should be looked at through the lens of race.
Jinx, you owe me a Coke.
Indeed. Good observation, Ryan. People who are racist and people who dislike racism both view things through the lens of race. And when you phrase it like that, it sure sounds like they're the same thing until you think about it even just the slightest bit and realize, hey, wait a minute, racists view things through the lens of race to oppress and subjugate minorities, while anti-racists look at things through the lens of race to understand that oppression and subjugation so that they can fight it better. That's not the same thing, Ryan. That's the opposite thing. What you're actually saying here is racists and anti-racists both have strong opinions about racism and no shit, dude. People who like Star Wars and people who hate Star Wars both have strong feelings about Star Wars. They're the same.
Sorry, I don't know. I just think we should
Roll back discrimination laws so we can hire based on race again. Jinx, now you owe me a Coke.
Remember earlier when I talked about empathy and how it's important to comedy? This type of thing is why. Because he's trying to make fun of the anti-racist position, but he doesn't understand it well enough to phrase it in a way that an anti-racist person would phrase it, so it's just real confusing. Instead, he just states what he thinks of their position as though that would be how they say it. And it's a little difficult to understand what he means here. I don't know any woke person who advocates repealing civil rights legislation so they can hire based on race again. But what I think he's trying to get at is like racial hiring quotas or affirmative action or something. The implication being that having a racial hiring quota is anti-civil rights because it means you're hiring based on race, which is therefore discriminatory. And before we look at the shitty logic of that statement, it's worth examining the way that it's phrased. Like the allegedly woke person explicitly saying that they want to roll back civil rights legislation, which is a decidedly unwoke thing to say that would get them #canceled. Even if you think that's like the end result of what the woke people want, you must recognize that they don't think that, right? Like, you get that they haven't just accepted rolling back civil rights legislation as a necessary evil that's required to end racism. They think, and they happen to be right, that diversity quotas don't require rolling back civil rights legislation. And you can disagree, you'd be wrong to disagree, but whatever. Surely, though, you don't think that the people who disagree with you actually completely agree with your assessment, but just think it would be super chill to do anyway? But okay, that's whatever. Do racial quotas or affirmative action roll back civil rights legislation? I mean, if people aren't supposed to be hired or fired based on their race, saying that you'd have to hire a certain amount of people of a certain race does seem to violate that principle, right? So even if the laws remain on the book, this means they're not being enforced, right? And in a vacuum, that sounds correct. There's a surface level logic to it. What it ignores, however, is the mountains of data which demonstrate a clear and consistent hiring bias against people of color. According to a meta-analysis of all field experiments pertaining to racial discrimination in hiring in the United States since 1990 by the Harvard Business Review, since 1990, white applicants received, on average, 36% more callbacks than black applicants, and 24% more callbacks than Latino applicants, with identical resumes. It may be illegal to give preferential treatment to white applicants, but people fucking do it anyway, because there's no way to prove that that's what they're doing. And they might not even realize they're doing it. It could be just like an implicit bias that they're not even aware of. So how do you enforce a law requiring that everyone is given it?
That is literally a phenomenon that occurs in every single facet of life. It's not just in the hiring process, it also is in the housing market. Whenever you leave it up to individuals to make assessments as to where somebody would live, how many properties you will show them based on their looks in person, their physical attributes or characteristics, or their name. Does it sound white versus does it sound non-white? This has been part of a study that HUD conducted back in 2012. That does prove that internal biases do apply to the housing market as well, with real estate mortgage or real estate brokers whenever it comes to showing apartments or other properties. And it is still very much part of the mortgage process, where loan officers will disproportionately discriminate against black and brown homeowners far more than they do their white counterparts. The reason why these laws exist is because these do play a role into the discriminatory factors that non-white people are subjugated to on a daily basis. If this didn't occur, if everyone were given the equal opportunities to own a home or get a job, we wouldn't need these civil rights laws to be put in place to begin with. But it's the fact that we do that means that somewhere along the lines, this has been a factor, so much so that we had to ensure that people were on paper given equal opportunities to, say, get a job, to own a home, and it goes even further than that. I mean, we kind of looked at some of that information on stream whenever I was doing the second YouTube video, where some real estate brokers and real estate agents will continue to shuttle people into predominantly white neighborhoods if they are a white prospect looking for a property, and the same thing with Hispanic, Asian, and African American property owners or prospects for rental properties. And so that's just like another element where an even more nefarious aspect of current conditions are still based on the legacies of long-standing racism in this country in the form of housing policy, right? The reason why we have segregated neighborhoods and de facto segregation to begin with still to this day is because of those racist housing policies, redlining, things like that, institutional racism that played a huge role in the way in which our built environment were sanctioned along racial lines. All right, sorry, we're getting off topic.
An equal opportunity regardless of race. Since the result you'd be looking for is a workplace that is racially representative of the population, one way to go about that might be to entice businesses to have their workforce's racial diversity more closely resemble that of the general population, hence quotas. Now, you can argue the efficacy of that strategy. Clearly, according to the same study, there's been no change in black hiring discrimination since 1990, so something ain't working. But I think it's pretty dishonest to represent the argument as simply wanting the ability to hire based on race because, just like literal white supremacists, they prefer one race to another.
Ask him about interracial dating.
All I said is that black men who date white women have internalized racism, and white men that date ethnic women are fetishizing them.
Guys against interracial dating now. Like, am I being pranked? Did Boomer put you up to this?
You couldn't even find a way to phrase it that made these seem like the same two things. You just said them together as though one implied the other when it clearly doesn't. Like, yeah, white people do have internalized racism that if they want to invest in an interracial relationship, they should work to overcome. Men can also have internalized sexism. That doesn't mean that heterosexuals can't date. I happen to hold the view that white people, myself included, can have internalized racism that doesn't magically disappear when they get into an interracial relationship. I'm also a white person who's in an interracial relationship, so clearly I don't have a problem with them, and I think that they are in fact very normal. These two positions in no way contradict.
If you've ever heard or listened to the black women's perspective on this, it's that they feel as though white men will fetishize them and treat them as if they are a forbidden fruit, where they want to experience sexual relationships with behind the scenes, but because they might be too afraid to be open with their interracial relationship, then they treat black women as if they are something to behold or to fetishize after, but it's their unwillingness to engage in a relationship publicly or exclusively that does make this fetishization problematic. Jesus. So yeah, you have to understand, black men are why can't I say fetishized? Fetishized too. I'll just say fetishized. I've seen it I've had it happen many times. I'm sure that, yeah, it's femininity, fetishized. What's wrong with me? And yeah, this is absolutely, I think that this is absolutely conducive to, social constructs that have not began to normalize interracial relationships in the way that it should. Nobody should feel as though that they are being fetishized, because we have not reached that point where it's completely normal in our society. She said the thing. Yeah, I think it's really sad that you all give me a fucking cookie every time I say the word femininity. I sense a lot of anxiety. Sometimes we reach points of contention. That is 100% true. I agree that it does apply to a lot of people. How dare you? She's a glass ceiling feminist. I was a glass ceiling feminist. I was.
One another, no matter how quickly you say them in rapid succession.
It's like he's a mind reader. I mean, I've been pushing for segregation forever, and my man does what?
I created an improv comedy show exclusively for ethnic people.
Guy segregates comedy on my birthday.
I feel like I shouldn't have to say this. Like, I feel like this is obvious, but you know that not being invited to perform at an improv comedy show is not the same thing as Jim Crow, right? Like, on some level, you must realize that having an improv comedy show for ethnics is not equivalent to segregation, right? Like, it's segregation in the very literal sense, like the same way that like a cutlery drawer is. It separates people and sorts them. Okay, I'll grant you that. By this definition, gendered washrooms are also segregation. So are tax brackets and online like Harry Potter house quizzes. But it's not segregation in the sense that, say, apartheid was. And that's not the type of segregation that racists like, Ryan. They like the kind where they can arrest disenfranchised people of color and brutalize them. If someone told me, hey, you can't come to this improv comedy show, it's not for you, I would say, oh, thank God. Whew. Dodged a bullet there. And if there's one thing in the world that is not suffering from a lack of white people, it is improv comedy. Just really think for a minute about the absurd privilege that went into writing this joke. Racists believe in segregation, and I too know this pain, because one time those woke ethnics wouldn't let me on their improv show. Do they not see? Hate only begets hate?
Us white people, we have so much privilege.
I agree, it is a privilege to be white.
That's not the same thing. White privilege doesn't mean it's a privilege to be white. It means that white people have a disproportionate advantage in society. But I feel like I've seen this argument before. It's on the tip of my tongue. Where did I see this before? Oh, that's right. It was in the neo-Nazi webcomic Red Panels. It was the neo-Nazi that made that point that you're making now. Kind of weird, right? That in your video about how woke people use the same arguments as racists, you end up using the same arguments as a neo-Nazi. Something to think about.
I guess the only thing we really disagree about is I think white people are the root of all evil.
But what did I tell you, though? If we can narrow that down to a certain group of tiny-hatted white people, I think we can come to an understanding.
Technically, I don't consider Jewish people white.
Neither do I.
Wait, if the racist doesn't think Jews are white, then how come he just said that they were white? You know what, fuck, whatever. The construction of this joke makes no sense, but perhaps that's a brilliant meta-commentary on how the substance of the joke also makes no sense. Woke lords just think white people are the root of all evil, citation needed, and racists think that the Jews are the root of all evil. These two things are equivalent because... Oh wait, he skipped that part because then he'd have to explain that it's actually pretty fucked up to conflate the guys who control everything being disproportionately responsible for the problems of the world, and a minority group who morons believe control everything being responsible for the problems of the world. Globally speaking, white people have all of the money and the power. Jewish people, by contrast, don't. That's why Jews keep getting murdered. One hint that these things are not equivalent is that there's not a bunch of purges of white people that have killed millions for the crime of being white. Nor has anyone been enslaved on the basis of their whiteness, or been legally considered inhuman, or prevented from voting, or kept in ghettos due to their whiteness. Comparatively, it seems pretty reasonable, actually, to lay the blame of the problems of the world on the powerful who benefit from those problems, rather than the powerless who suffer because of them. And this is how bad...
Just real quick, I want to interject because I want to tell you something that I saw a crazy, dumb, uneducated white girl make on TikTok about how during the time of settler colonialism and thereafter, whenever, I mean, it was well after settler colonialism and the United States had been established, and then all of a sudden, you know, Italians and Irish people who were coming over here in the early 1900s were experiencing really unfair discrimination from those who had already settled here from England primarily, and you know, somehow that was the same as white people experiencing the same long-standing traumas from slavery, in that white people too have had their fair share of discrimination and hatred from a bigoted perspective based on those white people who came over here in the United States and they were mistreated, and somehow that was comparable or the equivalent to slavery. I swear I saw this on TikTok. I cannot believe some arguments and how far people will go in trying to normalize the current conditions in the current state of the United States to undermine the Black Lives Matter movement. It is honestly just appalling to really hear some of these arguments. I'm feeling so gaslit. I mean, maybe I shouldn't even retell the story just because it's so damaging, it's so harmful, and also so fucking ridiculous that I don't have it right in front of me, that it could just sound like hearsay, but for fuck's sake, I'm not making this up. It is insane how far some white people will go to try to continue to victimize, to try to undermine the plights of African Americans in this country. Like, just anything. They'll pull anything out of their assholes. I recommend this if anyone wants an intro to the history of racism.
You are at this, Ryan. You take a straw man position that nobody actually believes,
oh, you're fine,
and put
man.
it up
Don't
against an even worse straw man so that it looks right by contrast. This joke would have been so easy to do. You just have the woke guy say, the real problems in this country are caused by the wealthy elite. A thing a woke person might actually say, because they are. Then the racist guy would say, right, I hear you, the Jews. And then the woke guy would be like, what? No, that's not what I meant. And then the racist guy goes, no, of course not. Wink. See? Then you have a joke. That works because it makes sense for both characters. Rather than the racist guy saying within seconds of each other that he does and does not think Jews are white. He can't write that though, because he thinks woke lords, whomever they might be, are just out there demonizing white people. Obviously, therefore, they must know that's what they're doing, and they're doing it intentionally. It doesn't occur to him that maybe they're motivated by something else. It's just that they're Captain Planet villains who purposefully set out to harm white people for yuck.
Yeah, sorry, like the whole thing about that story is that Italians and Irish people are white. They were experiencing discrimination from a nationalism perspective, from nationals who were mistreating other people from coming in from different countries. And it had nothing to do with their race so much. And yes, it was discriminatory, but it was not along racial lines. It was along national lines. It was white nationalists trying to protect and preserve their own legacy that they had created. And they didn't want other foreign nationals coming in and trying to occupy the same space. Sorry for that. I should have tied that together, but I did not. My apologies.
Sucks. He's unable to comprehend why people might think differently than him, and he's not curious enough to investigate. He has no idea what his opponents actually believe. He just assumes they think the same things he does, but have like an inverted sense of right and wrong, I guess. And that sucks for his comedy because it means he can never really write anyone who disagrees with him. They're always this gleefully malignant force determined to do bad things for no reason. He claims comedy exists to challenge established ideas, but weirdly seems unable to challenge his own preconceptions, whether it's something as straightforward as fibromyalgia or as difficult to grasp as why people disagree with you politically. He's positioned himself, like all other conservatives, whether or not he would accept that label, as the defender of the establishment. The ideas he sees fit to challenge are those which challenge the establishment in turn. And as much as that sucks for his comedy, it sucks way, way worse for his humanity. You can't grow that way, you can't change. And if you don't even know what your opponents believe, that means you're not listening to them, and that means you've decided you've got all the answers. And imagine how witheringly small that would make your spirit. To feel like the smartest guy in the room who doesn't even need to listen to what people have to say because he already knows everything worth knowing. Anything new is to be mocked and scorned rather than enriching his experience of the world. There can be no comedy in that place. There can be no laughter. Just a dwindling light that suffocates the harder you try to grasp it. But maybe I'm being unfair when I say all conservative comedy is unfunny. Check out this hilarious skit from comedian Alex Jones.
It's time to be a hero. It's time to wear the most advanced anti-COVID mask available on the market. The Glor 9000. Refreshing.
Now that's more like Alex jokes, am I right? Now that's what I call comedy. He'll lay a egg. Egg. Wait. No. Hello and welcome to the Egg Ball Zone. Here in the Egg Ball Zone, we highlight small creators who need egg balls on their work. Congratulations, everybody. You made it through a video about a white dude explaining why another white dude has bad ideas about racism. Both of us also managed to avoid speaking substantively on the issues. Making all of this even more of a waste of time is the fact that the United States is currently embroiled in an uprising against police brutality against primarily people of color. If you'd like to know more about how we got here and what an intractable problem it really is, Yusuf Talks explains it in his video, The Case for BLM, How the Government Created Police Brutality. Full disclosure, I don't agree with some of the positions in this video about how to solve the problem because I don't believe that the police as an institution can be reformed, but his outlining of the facts is so strong that this video is still well worth a watch regardless. Check it out. Do you have a small leftist project you'd like to see featured here somewhere in the Egg Ball Zone? Send me no more than one email with the word eyeball somewhere in the description, and perhaps you will find yourself trapped here in the Egg Ball Zone. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video that got a little away from me. Hey, why don't you
That was pretty good. That was pretty good. They need the tenants for the profit.